Hey YouTube people, Cameron here with the Butters Tech channel, and today we are taking a look at Stable Diffusion. Now you've probably seen all of the AI imagery that's been floating around and you want to know, how do I do that? Like, that seems so impossible. But the fact of the matter is, if you have a GPU that can play games, you basically can create these type of images. And some of the hardest things are just the setup of the Stable Diffusion programming environment, because it's web-based, it requires a Python environment, and that sometimes just goes right over people's heads. I'm taking this from the approach that you're just a gamer who is interested in, generating images and you don't know anything about programming. So let's go from there. I'm going to show you exactly how to install Stable Diffusion and get going on it, explain the interface, how to load models, where to get models, and what everything means in the interface to get you going as soon as possible. Let's kind of demystify this thing. So the first thing, I'm going to show you the install, and we're going to do this in the quickest way possible, least amount of steps. So let's take a look. We won't do any of the fluff. We won't do anything, but this is something you can do if you have a clean Windows install and a NVIDIA GPU, basically. So let's take a look. First thing you're going to do is go to python.org/download. And basically what you want to do is, they say here that we need to be using a specific version, 3.10.6. Okay, so 3.10.6. So by default, it's 3.11.4. So go to Python for Windows, and we're going to search for 3.10.6. There it is right there. And we have the Windows installer 64-bit. I'm going to go ahead and download that. Once that's downloaded, click that. And what you want to do right here is not just click install now, you want to customize the installation. And there's one key thing you need to click, which is this, add Python to environment variables. And we'll click install. Okay, so we're going to say close because the setup was successful. Now we're going to go and grab, it's basically a web interface that lets you use Stable Diffusion called Automatic 111. It's the easiest way to get started, in my opinion. So here's the URL. It will be in the link below, Automatic 111 Stable Diffusion -web UI. On here, there's a green button. GitHub is sometimes hard to navigate. But in this instance, a lot of times you want to go to releases to get things, but in this instance, we're going to click this green button and download a zip. Okay, and that gives us a Stable Diffusion zip file right here. I'm going to click the little arrow and say show in folder. Okay, so I have Stable Diffusion Web UI -master. Okay, so I'm just going to take all the files that are here, and I have my C drive right here. I'm installed. Let me do that again so you can see. There's a zip file. I'll double click into the zip file. All I'm going to do is grab this folder and copy it into my C drive. Just like this. Okay, so now when I go into my C, you can see that I have Stable Diffusion Web UI Master. Okay, now what you're going to do is just click into there, and super easy, you're going to double click Web UI-user. We'll double click that. It's going to say, hey, what the heck? Say run anyways. And you only want to do that with files that you trust, so just be careful. And now what we can do is let this download, and it will basically install itself. So I'm going to pause the video until this is done. I'm not going to touch anything. I'm just going to let it run, but pause it so you don't waste your time watching it. We'll be back. Okay, so the install just finished, and as part of the install, it does download what's called a model. The model that it downloaded is the Stable Diffusion model. But what you're looking for inside this command prompt, it may look like a bunch of gibberish, but here's what you're looking for. You're looking for this, running on local URL, because what's happened is Python is an environment that runs code, and that code has generated a web server on your computer, and if you follow that link, you go to the locally hosted web server that's hosted on your own computer, and that's where you get the interface. So we're going to go to a web browser and type in what you're seeing right here. And you can see we're in. We've got Stable Diffusion running. And I'm just going to move my head here. Okay, now with Stable Diffusion running, let's just do a quick image just to see what we can do. Let's just type in Ninja Chicken and click Generate. And there we go. Not much ninja, but definitely chicken there. Okay, so now that we have Stable Diffusion installed, we're able to generate images. There's lots of different models that you can use. So the basic Stable Diffusion model is going to show in the top left corner here. And this is version 1.5 Stable Diffusion. There's other models that can give you better results depending on what you're looking for. If you're trying to do something that looks more like Mid-Journey, or you're wanting to do stuff that looks more anime, or if you're trying to do things that look more surreal, if you're trying to do landscapes, depending on what you're trying to do, there's different models. And one of the places to get models is Civi, I don't even know how to say this, Civity AI. So this is a place where you can get models. But I'm going to include a link to some different ones down below that I think work a little, that are more generic. So we can play with it from a more generic standpoint. And one of those that I really like and think is pretty good is something called Open Journey. And Open Journey is right here. And it looks a little bit like Mid-Journey. It's meant to have that kind of look to it. So a lot of these models are found on Hugging Face. So this has lots of models and data sets for this type of thing. So a model is a file in basic terms, and it has a CKPT. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this, and I'm going to click download. Okay, so we're downloading an Open Journey model. Well, how do we install this model? It's very easy. You just have to go into your Stable Diffusion folder. So for example, we can go into our C drive. We go into the Stable Diffusion Web UI Master, and then there's a models directory. And you can see there are lots of different categories in here that we'll get into eventually, but right now, what you're looking for is C, Stable Diffusion, Web UI Master, Models, and then Stable Diffusion. This is where you can see we've already have the Stable Diffusion 1.5 model, and you can see it says put Stable Diffusion checkpoints here. Okay, so we have Open Journey. I'm going to copy or cut it, that checkpoint file, and I'm going to go back into my Stable Diffusion Models Stable Diffusion folder, paste it here, and now that's literally all you have to do to install a model. It's pretty easy. It's just knowing where to put things. So let's go back to Stable Diffusion, and we can now click this refresh button, and in our dropdown we should now see Open Journey. And the model processes for a minute. Let's try our Ninja Chicken prompt again. And you can see this gave us a kind of a much different result, a lot more stylized. Okay, so we've got our Ninja Chicken. And let's go over what all the different controls are. We won't go into super in-depth about everything right now, but just enough on this main page that you understand what things mean. So up here, if I clear this, you can see this is the prompt. And the prompt is kind of positive influences on the model, what you want it to show you. And you can separate things by commas. So Ninja Chicken is one thing. If you want a ninja holding a chicken, that's another thing. So let's see what that looks like. Okay, now we've got a ninja, roughly holding a chicken. So negative prompts are something that we can filter out for. So we did want to see the ninja holding a chicken, but maybe we don't want to see black clothing. So we want to see a ninja holding a chicken, but not wearing black clothing. So let's go ahead and click generate there. And there you go. He's wearing orange clothing. So you can see how you can kind of adjust your prompts based on these things. Now, sampling method, there's lots of different options. Frankly, I don't know exactly what this means in general. I've seen there's ways to basically look at the way people have generated things, and they'll use these different methods. This is, from what I can tell, my gut feel is that this is the way it kind of starts with something and kind of builds on top of it to create an image. So you can experiment with these, but we won't go too far into it. We're just going to use the Euler A for now. So sampling steps. This is kind of like the number of times it kind of reworks the image in order for it to become more complex. So for example, we did 20 iterations to kind of get to the sampling steps to get to this step. Let's increase this to like 80. You'll see that in general, these images should get a little bit more detailed and complicated. There you go. You can see that there's a lot of more ruffles in the feathers. This tends to add detail. In fact, I need to show you something right now so we can experiment with this a little bit. So for example, I'm going to talk about the seed right now. A -1 gives you a random seed. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do, you can do a random seed. This button right here will let us reuse the same seed that we just used. It's nice, depending on what you're trying to do, it's nice to use random seeds because you're going to get varied imagery. But in this case, we want to have a similar image so I can show you what sampling steps does. So for example, we did 80, so it became a little bit detailed. I don't even know what we're looking at here, but watch what happens when I bring the sampling steps down from 80 to 50. You can see it kind of like made it different. It had a different take on the base. And if we reduce that back to 20, it's going to become even simpler. And if we move this down to something like 4, it's going to be, pretty rough. Okay, so it didn't have time to kind of try to make sense of what it was doing. So you can really play with the complexity here, and depending on what type of models you're using, it can change things. So, and this can very much so increase the processing time. So in general, the higher sampling steps, the longer it's going to take to generate these images. Okay. Restore faces. That basically will try to emphasize if it thinks something is a face, it will try to make those look more like faces. That's kind of a programmatical add-on in later versions that they've added. Width is very... Width and height, it does exactly what you think it would do. So if we do width 640, width 480, height 640, it's going to change the aspect ratio of our image, and you'll get a different outcome. Batch count. So rather than generate like one picture at a time, you can say, hey, give me 5 pictures all at once. And then that way you can kind of sift through what you're looking for quicker, because you're not always going to get exactly what you think you want quickly. And this is going to give you 5 iterations at once in your batch. Batch size, same thing. So if we do batch size of 2, so there's 5 in the batch and there's 2 batches, we're going to have 10 total images that pop up here. There you go. And, you know, I generally, you know, maybe do 4. I kind of just stick to 1 usually. But it's nice getting variations on what you want to see. Okay, so the other thing, we're getting very similar images here. And part of that's because our seed is the same. So if we randomize it, we'll put it back to -1, and it will pull seeds a lot differently. So we'll start to see a lot more variation. Let's try a black chicken on a farm. And we'll take out our negative prompt. Let's generate that. Okay. So there we go. We've got, you know, a black chicken on a farm pretty quickly. Now, there's lots of different things you can do here to stylize your prompt. So for example, Picasso artwork. You could do acrylic and see what that looks like. So then we get more of images that look like a painting. So let's do something. Let me show you where you can go to get prompt ideas. So one of the great places to do that is Prompt Hero. Okay, so you can see there's just like some really cool looking things here. So let's go ahead and click Stable Diffusion, and this will show us imagery that came up using Stable Diffusion. Now, what I found is it's actually pretty hard to replicate some of these in general. And there's lots of, I mean, these are all examples that were generated with Stable Diffusion 1.5. So we should be able to replicate these fairly closely. Let's go ahead, let's choose this one. And you can see here, this is telling you exactly how this was generated. So here's the prompt. Okay, we can copy the prompt here, go back to Stable Diffusion. Okay, we'll drop the prompt in there. But it's not just about the prompt. You've also got to use the generation parameters. And you can see it's 512 by 768. And the seed is this. So let's copy the seed. And if you don't use the same seed, you're not going to get the same picture. Probably won't even get close to the same picture. And it's using a guidance scale of 6 with 50 steps. So how that translates over here is a guidance scale of 6, and the steps are 50. Okay. And they use Stable Diffusion 1.5, which is what we're using. And let's see what this gives us, see if it gives us anything close to what we're looking for. Did I change the resolution? 512 by 768, 512 by 768. Okay. And there you can see my batch size was set to 4. Let's just do 1 on it. And we should get this same first image when we do it again. And you can see this is pretty close to the image that we were pulling on the other, or copying this prompt. But you can see it's slightly different, which it's always interesting to see that. The reason that that may be happening, and you'll find this a lot, you'll try to replicate something and you just can't. In fact, it's actually very hard to get this exactly right. If you're just trying to copy someone else's stuff, yeah, that can be difficult. But the reason why that would be is because there's usually a lot of negative prompts that are going on that are sometimes they're not published, or slightly different configuration settings. They may actually, the sampling method may be different. Let's try that just for fun. Let's go to, let's try DPM2A chorus and see if that does anything different. Okay. So there you can see we did get a slightly different generated image, and it's like very different. And it's different than what we're seeing over here, but we're getting close. Let's try another one just for fun, just because this is neat. Let's try DPM plus 2SA. So yeah, we're getting different iterations, and that's the thing when you're using stable diffusion is you never know what you're going to get, and it's a lot of sifting and filtering and changing your prompts in order to find something that ends up looking good. And you can tweak it quite a bit to get what you want. So another thing we can do, so for example, we're in the Stable Diffusion 1.5. Let's change our model over to the Open Journey model. And the seed's definitely not going to, it's not going to look nearly the same at all, but let's see what we do get. We may see something interesting just by using a different model. Okay, yeah, and there right away, using Open Journey, it's trained on a different set of data, and it makes different sense of that seed. And, we've got something quite a bit different. Let's go ahead and randomize that and see what else we get. So there you go. Like we just are getting lots of different variations on the same thing, and this looks pretty cool. So if we want a negative prompt, we could do well, let's do positive prompts. Let's say we'll drop big eyes and we'll drop blonde hair and see what happens. Okay, we're getting kind of like Samus Aran here. The big eyes was maybe a mistake. Those look a little too big to me. But yeah, you can tweak the settings and pull out the image that you want to get. So pretty cool stuff here. You can generate what you want. So that's a basic overview of Stable Diffusion, how to use it, how to get it set up. Hope you enjoyed this. I'll have more videos on how to utilize Stable Diffusion. There's a lot of cool techniques and tricks that you can use. We haven't even got into image generation, not based on text, but based on other images. So you can kind of, take a certain image and then stylize it using a different model so it becomes something completely different. So really cool stuff. Get subscribed to see more of that. Thanks for watching. Hope this was helpful for you to get started with your own Stable Diffusion images, and we'll see you on the next video.